marriage. For centuries, it was considered the cornerstone of civilization, the sacred bond that held families, tribes, and entire nations together. To marry was to fulfill one's duty. To refuse was to invite suspicion, ridicule, and loneliness. Yet Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher of the abyss, looked at marriage with eyes unclouded by tradition. He saw it not as a sacred institution, but as a trap, one that lured men with promises of love, warmth, and companionship, only to smother their spirit, sap their will, and dull their edge. Nietzsche himself never married. He proposed, yes, but was famously rejected, particularly by Lou Andreas Salome. Perhaps it was a blessing, for his solitude gave birth to Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Beyond Good and Evil, and The Will to Power. Would Nietzsche have written such works if he had a wife and children demanding his presence at the dinner table? He doubted it. And so Nietzsche, the solitary philosopher, saw his freedom as an essential component of his creativity. Nature, as Nietzsche saw it, did not view love as harmony. He saw it as war. In Exomo he wrote, "Have people had ears to hear my definition of love? It is the only definition worthy of a philosopher. Love in its means is war. In its foundation, it is the mortal hatred of the sexes." For nature, the perfect woman was not a gentle companion, but a force of chaos. The perfect woman tears you to pieces when she loves you. What a dangerous, creeping, subterranean little beast of prey she is. Nietzsche's skepticism about marriage did not stem from bitterness or a failure with women. It came from his relentless honesty about human nature. He believed that behind the veil of love, there are instincts, often selfish, often unconscious, that steer men and women in directions that clash with truth, freedom, and greatness. For Nietzsche, marriage was not merely a personal decision, it was a cultural prison, a contract written by society, not by love itself. He once wrote, "Marriage is the will of two to create the one who is more than those who created it." This sounds noble at first. Marriage is a creative project, a union of two souls producing something greater. But Nietzsche also knew that in reality, most marriages do not strive for this higher ideal. Instead, they stagnate. They reduce both individuals into predictable roles. Nietzsche believed that great men, those who push civilization forward, who embody the will to power, need solitude, struggle, and a relentless pursuit of their vision. But marriage ties a man down to routine, to compromise, to the needs of another who may not share his path. Once he compromises, he risks losing the very fire that makes him great. This is why Nietzsche warned against marrying too young. In his view, a man in his 20s or early 30s has not yet discovered his true self, his instincts, his passions, his philosophy. These are still unfolding. To marry early is to chain yourself to another person before you even know what you were meant to become. The result is mediocrity. Nietzsche went further. He argued that most women are not interested in greatness but in security. He saw this as part of the biological instinct. Women, by nature, seek stability, continuity, and safety for their offspring. This is not evil, he thought, but it is at odds with the dangerous, uncertain path of genius. So, when a great man marries, he often finds himself torn between two worlds, the world of creation, which demands all his energy, and the world of comfort, which slowly drains it away. The tension between these worlds can suffocate him. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche wrote warnings about relationships. He exposed the power dynamics within them, the way desire, dependency, and control twist into one another. For him, marriage often became less about love and more about domination. One controls, the other submits, and in that battle, true freedom dies. But Nietzsche was not against love. In fact, he saw love as one of the highest experiences of human life. What he despised was the way society tamed love, turning it into an institution, a contract, a legal bond. For Nietzsche, this was the death of love's fire. The moment love becomes duty, it ceases to be love. But here's the real question. Why did Nietzsche believe that marriage, specifically, was such a dangerous trap for a man of vision? Because for Nietzsche, greatness demanded an unforgiving devotion to one's inner mission. The philosopher, the artist, the warrior, the man who seeks to create something beyond himself. He cannot afford to be pulled into the compromises and small comforts of domestic life. Marriage, Nietzsche warned, often asks of a man the very opposite of what greatness requires: stability instead of risk, routine instead of struggle, peace instead of conflict. It's not that these are bad. In fact, for the ordinary man, they might be necessary. But for the man who seeks to climb beyond the ordinary, for the man who wants to break into new realms of thought, art, or power, these comforts are chains disguised as blessings. Nietzsche saw marriage as a civilizing tool. It keeps men in check, gives them responsibility, ties them to property, family, and routine, all of which makes them predictable, tame, safe. But ask yourself, when has greatness ever come from safety? The genius, Nietzsche argued, thrives on solitude, on intensity, on the ability to let his entire being be consumed by the fire of creation. A wife, children, the obligations of family, they scatter a man's energies into 100 directions. His spirit is no longer one blazing arrow, but a flickering candle in the storm. Nietzsche once wrote, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost anyhow." The danger of marriage is that it gives men an easy why: family, comfort, security, and in doing so, it tempts them to stop searching for the higher why. This is why Nietzsche admired solitude, not as loneliness, but as a crucible. The place where a man confronts his demons, discovers his voice, and hardens his will. Solitude is where the Übermensch is forged. Marriage, in contrast, too often softens the edge. It domesticates the wildness that drives a man toward greatness. Nietzsche believed most men would willingly trade their potential for comfort. But the few, those destined for something higher, must resist. And here lies the paradox. It is not that love or even women are evil. It is that they are powerful forces, forces that can lift a man to temporary heights, but just as easily consume him entirely. Nietzsche's warning was not against women themselves, but against the illusion that marriage is the highest fulfillment of a man's life. For Nietzsche, the highest fulfillment was always to become who you are. Nietzsche once observed that he who has a why to live for can bear almost anyhow. But here lies the paradox. Many men confuse their why with someone else's expectations. They tether their life's purpose not to their own inner flame, but to the weight of marriage, family, and the quiet suffocation of duty. Marriage, especially in Nietzsche's time, was not a union of equals. It was an institution, a cage disguised as respectability. The man was expected to provide, to shoulder the endless grind of labor, to protect, to maintain appearances. His individuality was swallowed by the machinery of society's demands. Nietzsche saw this clearly. He realized that when a man marries too early, or for the wrong reasons, he ceases to live for himself. He becomes a role, a provider, a husband, a father, but no longer an individual who seeks greatness. Think about this. How many men in history and in our own time have buried their dreams under the soil of responsibility? How many poets, philosophers, artists, and thinkers have dimmed their light because the obligations of marriage pressed too heavily on them? Nietzsche did not despise women. That's a shallow misreading. He feared the institution of marriage because it demanded conformity. It chained the free spirit. It required the great man to become ordinary. The 19th century household was structured like a factory. The man was the worker, the engine. The wife managed the domestic sphere. Children multiplied. The wheel of duty turned endlessly. For Nietzsche, this rhythm was unbearable. It meant abandoning the pursuit of truth, art, and philosophy for the endless cycle of survival. Now reflect on today. The dynamic has changed in appearance, but not in essence. Men still enter marriages that demand they silence their ambitions in exchange for stability. Nietzsche would call this a betrayal of the self. Not betrayal by another, but betrayal from within. He warned that no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. And marriage too often exacts precisely that price. It buys stability at the cost of individuality. It purchases comfort at the expense of greatness. The weight of responsibility, when accepted unconsciously, kills the fire. But when chosen consciously, when a man knows his mission and chooses companionship in alignment with it, that responsibility can be transformed. Most men never make that distinction. They stumble into marriage because it is expected, because society whispers, "This is what a good man does." But Nietzsche never bowed to those whispers. He wanted men to live dangerously, to carve their own path, even if it meant walking alone. But here is where we must be very careful not to simply repeat Nietzsche's warning. To not marry without understanding the deeper nuances is to miss the point entirely. Because Nietzsche, for all his attacks on marriage, was not merely bitter. He was not just a lonely cynic shouting from the outside. He was a philosopher who understood the weight of sacrifice. He knew that life itself demands trade-offs, and marriage, more than almost any other choice, forces a man to confront what he is willing to sacrifice. So let us strip the issue bare. When a man marries, he gives up one kind of freedom to gain another. He loses the freedom to be unbounded, untethered, consumed entirely by his work or by his solitude. But in return, he may gain stability, a home, children, companionship, and a sense of rootedness. Nietzsche's question was never, is marriage good or bad? His question was, is marriage worthy of a great man? For some men, the answer is yes. They find a partner who challenges them, who does not dull their fire but sharpens it. They build a household that does not suffocate their greatness, but supports it. For these rare cases, marriage becomes an ally to their mission rather than an obstacle. But for most men, marriage is not that. For most men, marriage is a quiet resignation to the ordinary. It is a bargain struck with mediocrity. And this is why Nietzsche urged caution, even defiance. He was not telling every man to remain alone. He was telling men, do not chain yourself lightly. Do not enter into marriage unless you are certain that it will not destroy what is highest in you. This is why he said, marriage has been, until now, the graveyard of great men. The final choice then is yours. Will you follow the path of solitude, guarding your freedom with a fierce grip? Or will you dare to risk it all, hoping that your union will elevate rather than suffocate you? Nietzsche's warning about marriage wasn't a condemnation of love or the role of women in a man's life. It was a critique of the institution itself, one that he believed had become a tool of social conformity. For Nietzsche, marriage was not the fulfillment of human potential, but often a force that robbed individuals of their greatness. His philosophy is rooted in the idea of the Übermensch, the overman, a being who transcends the ordinary and embraces the challenges of life fully. The Übermensch cannot be shackled by the expectations of society, nor can he afford to be complacent or domesticated by the routines that marriage often brings. To embrace greatness, Nietzsche argued, one must embrace solitude. Solitude is where a man can truly discover himself, where his passions, his philosophy, and his vision for the future can be cultivated without distraction. It is in this space that true creativity and greatness are forged. This is the environment where men like Nietzsche himself were able to craft their life's work. He did not see loneliness as a curse, but as a necessary state for anyone who aspires to greatness. However, Nietzsche's philosophy is not an absolute rejection of companionship or love. Rather, it is a call for self-awareness and understanding. Nietzsche is not urging men to reject love or women outright, but to understand what it means to enter into such relationships. For many, marriage can be a beautiful union, but it is not a guarantee of happiness or fulfillment. It demands sacrifices, compromises, and a restructuring of personal goals and ambitions. And for the man who is dedicated to a higher purpose, those sacrifices may be too great. In this sense, Nietzsche's thoughts on marriage force us to question the way we view relationships and commitment in our own lives. How many of us have entered into marriage not out of love, but out of expectation? How many have sought companionship not because it is part of their grand vision for their lives, but because society dictates that we must? Nietzsche's philosophy calls us to reevaluate the reasons we pursue relationships and challenges us to consider whether the path we are on truly serves our deepest needs and desires. Nietzsche understood the weight of the choice to marry. He knew that marriage, like any major life decision, requires a deep commitment, and it demands that a man asks himself some difficult questions. What does he want out of life? What is his mission? What will he sacrifice to pursue his vision? Marriage is a lifelong commitment, and to make it thoughtlessly or without understanding the full implications is to risk the very thing that makes a man great, his individuality and his pursuit of his own path. The idea that men must give up their individuality to fit into a traditional social role is something Nietzsche sought to dismantle. He did not see it as noble for a man to live only to serve the needs of a family or to conform to societal expectations. To Nietzsche, a man who lives for the needs of others without attending to his own vision of greatness is a man who has betrayed himself. This is why he advised men not to marry unless they were sure that their vision, their work, their creative energy could thrive within the context of a relationship. For many, this is an impossible task. And yet, there are exceptions. Nietzsche knew that not all men are created equal. There are those who find great partners, those who find in marriage a source of strength, inspiration, and support. For these men, marriage does not hinder their quest for greatness, but complements it. But for the vast majority, marriage is a chain that limits their freedom, suffocates their spirit, and dulls their edge. This is why Nietzsche warned against it. The greatest challenge Nietzsche saw in marriage was not necessarily the presence of love, but the way it is institutionally framed and the expectations it brings. He was deeply critical of a society that placed marriage on a pedestal, elevating it as the ultimate form of fulfillment. In Nietzsche's view, this social construct led many men to fall into the trap of complacency. Marriage, for the majority, became a way to gain stability, but it was also a way to avoid the struggle that is necessary for personal and creative growth. Marriage then becomes a double-edged sword. On one hand, it offers stability, companionship, and emotional support. On the other hand, it asks a man to compromise his deepest instincts, his individual path, and his creative fire. For the man who seeks greatness, these compromises may be too much to bear. Nietzsche's philosophy encourages us to think about what we truly want from life and what we are willing to sacrifice to achieve it. It is a call to live authentically, to break free from the societal norms and expectations that seek to confine us, and to make choices that align with our highest purpose. Marriage, in this sense, is not inherently bad, but it can be a dangerous institution for those who wish to transcend the ordinary and embrace their true potential. Ultimately, Nietzsche's view of marriage is not a blanket condemnation of the institution, but a warning to those who seek greatness. It is a challenge to anyone who wishes to become more than they are, to question whether marriage will truly support their journey or whether it will pull them down into the realm of mediocrity. Nietzsche's call is clear. Do not marry out of societal expectation or fear of loneliness. Do not marry because it is the right thing to do. Instead, marry only if you are certain that it will elevate your purpose and support your path to greatness. This challenge is not just for men. It is for anyone who aspires to live a life of meaning and purpose. It is a call to understand the cost of every decision we make, including the decision to enter into a relationship. Nietzsche's philosophy does not demand that we reject love or companionship, but it asks us to approach these aspects of life with self-awareness, honesty, and a clear understanding of what we are willing to sacrifice. In the end, Nietzsche's warning is not just about marriage, it is about the tension between duty and freedom, comfort and greatness, compromise and vision. It is about understanding that the greatest achievements in life often come at a cost, and that the path to greatness is rarely smooth or easy. But for those who choose to walk it, the rewards are immeasurable. So, as Nietzsche would say, choose your path carefully. Do not let the expectations of society or the lure of comfort steer you away from your true mission. And if you choose to marry, do so with full awareness of what that choice means, and with the conviction that it will not diminish the fire of your inner vision. Only then can marriage become an ally rather than a trap. The final choice, as always, is yours. Will you choose comfort and conformity, or will you choose to live a life of intensity, struggle, and greatness? The path you take will define who you are and what you become. Choose wisely.